August weather. Yeah, it's good. It's good. It's good. We've had our windows open for quite a while, and it's been nice. Until last night when it was super wet and muggy and gross. And I just woke up this morning and I said, this is going to be a very bad day for my voice. And I am absolutely right so far. So, Nathan, that sounds like an excuse, and you better believe that it is. So if you hear me coughing or gagging or just my voice slowly getting softer as we go, I'm blaming the weather. So there you go. Anyway, there's strike one for me. So, welcome. All right. I wrote in my notes, welcome to the last week of the infamous Scoundrels series that we've been doing. And since this is the last day, who could we have saved for last? They must be terrible. The worst person in Scripture. Who could be after Judas or after Jezebel? That character has to be the worst scallywag of all time. Well, actually not so much, for two reasons. One, this isn't the last week. When I wrote that in my notes, I didn't realize there's 2 more weeks. So, strike 2. So, you know what they say, 3 strikes and you lose your voice. That's right. So, we got 2 more weeks, but also the person we're going to be learning about today, if you're grading them on a curve, they are nowhere near Judas and they are nowhere near Jezebel. Today we are going to be looking at Mikael, the daughter of Saul. Some people pronounce it her name Michael, but I have a son named Michael, so I'm just going to stay away from that altogether. We're going to call her Mikael. All right. Don't be too embarrassed if you have never heard of her or don't remember her name throughout Scripture. Many people forget who Saul is also, all the time. Whenever I do a lesson that involves the kings of Israel, I always ask whoever's in the audience, hey, who was the first king of Israel? And almost always people are like, it's David. And I'm like, you're wrong. And I was like, no, it's Saul. And they're like, oh, yeah, Saul. He changed his name to Paul. I get it. And like, no, you're wrong again. It doesn't matter the audience, whether they're third graders, seniors in high school, sometimes even senior citizens. Usually David is the answer, which is wrong. It's Saul. But anyway, Mikael is really only remembered by many Christians for the way that she behaved in one particular story. And while she may not be a villain or a major antagonist in Scripture, she is human with flaws that many, if not all of us, can relate to, and sometimes we fall into also. So who is this Mikael? We will go through much of her character today, but the basic information is that she is King Saul's daughter and David's first wife. King Saul's daughter and David's wife. So turn with me, if you will, to 2 Samuel chapter 6. And while you're turning there, I'll give you some context, some backstory to where we are at in Scripture so that we can kind of get a feel of where we're at. The time of the judges has ended, and Saul has not been anointed king yet, but the Israelite army goes out to battle the Philistines, one of the major nations that Israel fights against in the Old Testament. And the people that are leading this are 2 of the priest's sons, the priest Eli. They were 2 wicked, wicked men. And the people of Israel were not following the Lord very well at that time, so they lost that battle. And in losing that battle, they also lost the Ark of the Covenant. The Philistines were able to take it away, which was a huge demoralizing thing for the people of Israel and a huge victory for the Philistines. But luckily for the Israelites, God was not too big of a fan of them taking the ark, so God punishes the Philistines with death and tumors until they return the ark back to Israel. So then Saul is anointed king, and he has struggles with the Philistines and with God himself, so much so that God takes away the kingdom from Saul, and he gives it to David instead. Saul's descendants are no longer going to be on the throne of Israel, and David's descendants will. Saul dies, and after some more power struggle, David is now king over all of Israel. All of Israel. That's all happens in 1 Samuel and parts of 2 Samuel up until this point. We're there. We're there. Now let's start reading. Verse 1 of chapter 6. Now David again gathered all the chosen men of Israel, 30,000. And David arose and went with all the people who were with him to Baal Judah to bring up from there the ark of God, which is called by the name of the Lord of hosts, who is enthroned above the cherubim. They placed the ark of God on a new cart, or that they might bring it from the house of Abinadab, which was on the hill. And Uzzah and Ahio, the sons of Abinadab, were leading the new cart. So they brought it with the ark of God from the house of Abinadab, which was on the hill. And Ahio was walking ahead of the ark. Meanwhile, David and all the house of Israel were celebrating before the Lord with all kinds of instruments made of fir wood, with lyres, harps, tambourines, castanets, and cymbals. But when they came to the threshing floor of Nachon, Uzzah reached out toward the ark of God and took hold of it, for the oxen nearly upset it. And the anger of the Lord burned against Uzzah, and God struck him down there for his irreverence, and he died there by the ark of God. David became angry because of the Lord's outburst against Uzzah, and that place was called Perez Uzzah to this day. So David was afraid of the Lord that day, and he said, "How can the ark of the Lord come to me?" And David was unwilling to move the ark of the Lord into the city of David with him. But David took it aside to the house of Obed-Edom the Gittite. Thus the ark of the Lord remained in the house of Obed-Edom the Gittite 3 months. And the Lord blessed Obed-Edom and all his household. All right, we'll stop there. So, let's recap that. David wanted the ark in Jerusalem. In this, when he's saying the city of David, he's not talking about Bethlehem. He's talking about Jerusalem, because David is now the new king, and he has made Jerusalem the capital of Israel. So the ark was this great symbol of the glorious throne of God, and it had been missing from the tabernacle in Shiloh for many years. Some commentators say over 75 years it's been gone from where it's supposed to be. Jerusalem now being the new capital of this nation of Israel, David wanted God's presence to be there. David even had plans to build a permanent home there. He wanted to build a temple of God in Jerusalem. But God said, "No, don't worry about that. Your son's going to take care of that. You just build a house for yourself, and I'm going to give you rest from your enemies." That all happens in the next chapter of chapter 7. But from what we have just read, David's first attempt to bring the ark was a failure. It was not good. But how could it have been a failure? That doesn't make any sense. Wasn't he doing a good thing? This is the ark of the Lord. Why would it not be a good place to be in Jerusalem, the capital, bringing all the people together, one nation under Yahweh? It seems like that would be the right thing. However, it was a failure. And if we examine how they did this, it will show that they did things all wrong. They did things all wrong. There was a reason it was a failure. Number one, nowhere in those first 11 verses does it say that David or any priests sought the Lord's will or direction in this. David's just like, "Hey, men of Israel, 30,000 of you, come with me. We're going to go take the ark. Let's go. Hurrah." But they never inquired of the Lord what they should do. 2, they did not carry the ark like Moses had instructed them. Only the descendants of Kohath could carry the ark on poles, according to Numbers 4. What they did do, actually, was more of what the pagan Philistines did. A chapter earlier, in 1 Samuel, when the ark was in the Philistine camps and it was causing all these problems for them, they said, "We have to get this thing out of here." So 1 Samuel chapter 6, verse 7 and 8. This is the Philistines talking. "Now therefore, take and prepare a new cart with 2 milch cows on which there has never been a yoke, and hitch the cows to the cart and take their calves home away from them. Take the ark of the Lord and place it on the cart, and put the articles of gold which you returned to him as a guilt offering in a box by its side. Then send it away that it may go." So that's what the Philistines did. These pagans, they're like, "Let's get a new cart. Let's get these cows together. Let's put the ark on there and get it out of here." That's what they did. But that's not what the people of Israel are supposed to do. They had specific rules on how to dismantle things, how to prepare the instruments, how to move things. Number 3, when the ark looked like it would teeter or get upset because the ox stumbled a little bit, Uzzah, one of the sons of Abinadab, he reached out to touch it, to grab it, stop it from falling, which again seems like a great thing, but he died for touching it. This version said because of his irreverence. And this was also mentioned plenty of times in the law. Numbers 4:15 says this: when Aaron and his sons had finished covering up the holy objects and all the furnishings of the sanctuary, when the camp is to set out, after the sons of Kohath shall come and carry them, so that they will not touch the holy objects and die. So it was perfectly there in Scripture. These are the things in the tent of meeting which the sons of Kohath are to carry. In Numbers 4:20, a few verses down the road, but they shall not go in to see the holy objects even for a moment, or they will die. So that's even more of harsh words. You can't even look at these things, otherwise you will die. So I don't know if the priests or David didn't know this, they didn't study the Scriptures well enough, or that they just ignored it, but they obviously didn't do these things the first time. And someone died because of it. So anyway, David's afraid, and rightfully so. Like, oh no, we failed. Someone's already dead. Let's leave the ark here in the house of Obed-Edom, who is a Levite. So their first attempt wasn't a failure. Even though there was huge unity and excitement about this among the people. The idea of bringing the ark to Jerusalem was a positive one. Yeah, this is a great idea. We used to bring the ark into battles, for crying out loud. Let's get it back to us. So how could it have gone so wrong? Warren Wiersbe, in his commentary, says this about this passage. Talking to us as the church. I put it in your notes. The church today needs to heed this reminder and return to the Word of God for an understanding of the will of God. No amount of unity or enthusiasm can compensate for disobedience. The crowds may approve what we do, but what about the approval of God? So what they thought in their minds was a good thing was actually disobedience because they were doing it wrong. And we need to be careful as the church to not just go to whatever's popular. Yeah, there's a lot of unity in this one area. There's a lot of excitement in this idea. But if it doesn't fall in the Word of God, or the Word of God contradicts that thing, we shouldn't be doing it. We shouldn't be doing it. We need to wait for God's approval, not just man's approval. Now I'm going to say I am very thankful for the leadership of this church. They stand on God's word and don't follow the crowds or the trends of modern Christianity or political views. We care about God's approval before men's approval. And I'm very thankful that that is the way it is here at Faith Community Church. Hey, Nate, you might be saying, where is Mikael in all this? Good question. Let's keep on going and see if she's in the next section. Maybe she's not. I don't know. Verse 12. Now it was told King David, saying, the Lord has blessed the house of Obed-Edom and all that belongs to him on account of the ark of God. David went and brought up the ark of God from the house of Obed-Edom into the city of David with gladness. And so it was that when the bearers of the ark of the Lord had gone 6 paces, he sacrificed an ox and a fatling. And David was dancing before the Lord with all his might. And David was wearing a linen ephod. So David and all the house of Israel were bringing up the ark of the Lord with shouting and the sound of the trumpet. When it happened, as the ark of the Lord came into the city of David, that Mikael, the daughter of Saul, looked out of the window and saw King David leaping and dancing before the Lord, and she despised him in her heart. So they brought the ark of the Lord and set it in its place inside the tent which David had pitched for it. And David offered burnt offerings and peace offerings before the Lord. When David had finished offering the burnt offering and peace offering, he blessed the people in the name of the Lord of hosts. Further, he distributed to all the people, to all the multitude of Israel, both to men and to women, a cake of bread, and one of the dates, and one of the raisins to each one. Then all the people departed, each to his house. All right, this second attempt was the opposite of failure. What was it? It was a success. It was a success. So David hears, hey, this Obed-Edom guy is doing really well because of the ark. All of his things are being blessed. And then David's like, okay, I think this is time. We want that blessing for the ark because this is the capital city. So this time, he gets things right. He gets things right, though. He got the right pole bearers this time. And after the first 6 paces, he sacrificed an ox and a fatling, saying, please, Lord, bless this journey. Some commentators say that he did it this one time at the start of the trip. Others say that every 6 paces he would sacrifice an ox. That would be a lot of sacrifices, trying to get into the city from another city. Whichever way is true. I don't know ancient Hebrew. I'm sure Pastor Bob will be able to answer this question a lot better than me. But which way is correct, the Lord blessed this trip. They did it right. And this is where this famous story takes place. We all know about David dancing before the ark and his linen ephod, making a fool of himself. David is dancing before the Lord with all his might. Has anybody seen anybody dance with all their might before? It's got to be a spectacle. All of your strength just bobbing and weaving. I don't know. Crazy. But that's what David's doing. The people are rejoicing as the ark is brought into the city. Just imagine the sight of the streets. All the people lined up. I don't know, waving their handkerchiefs, throwing confetti. You know those videos of like ships going off into sea and all the people on the shore are like, yeah, see you later. Think of that. Think of that. Some crazy thing. Rejoicing, shouting, blowing trumpets. And then verse 16, there is a huge mood shift. There's all this excitement. And then verse 16, let's read it again. Then it happened, as the ark of the Lord came into the city of David, that Mikael, the daughter of Saul, looked out of the window and saw King David leaping and dancing before the Lord, and she despised him in her heart. It's kind of a downer passage. All this excitement, all this happiness, and she's like, man, I do not like what's going on here. But then it jumps right back in with verse 17. David is leaping and dancing. According to commentators, this word dancing kind of means whirling around with joy, spinning around with joy. I don't know if you've seen little kids in a long time, but when they're excited or they just got so much energy, they spin in circles. What's that about? I don't get it. We don't get it as adults, but they love it. They're so happy. They're spinning with joy. Think of that as David. He's just twirling because he's so happy. He's rejoicing. And David offered burnt offerings and peace offerings and blessed the people and handing out food. Then David is ready to go and bless his own home. That's where verse 20 comes in. Verse 20. But when David returned to bless his household, Mikael, the daughter of Saul, came out to meet David and said, how the king of Israel distinguished himself today. He uncovered himself today in the eyes of his servant maids as one of the foolish ones shamefully uncovers himself. So David said to Mikael, it was before the Lord who chose me above your father and above all his house to appoint me ruler over the people of the Lord, over Israel. Therefore, I will celebrate before the Lord. I will be more lightly esteemed than this and will be humble in my own eyes. But with the maids of whom you have spoken, with them I will be distinguished. Mikael, the daughter of Saul, had no children to the day of her death. Well, yikes. What a story. It starts off rough with a huge failure and a death of someone. And then it spikes with success and rejoicing and all this great stuff, but then it ends on a note of personal conflict between a husband and a wife. And again, this story we know very well, and we know it a lot from David's perspective. We know that, he was dancing before the Lord. He was worshiping in his own way. He didn't care what other people thought. But we're not talking about David right now. We're talking about Mikhail. So let's look at this at Mikhail in this story. She is first mentioned in verse 16 when we hear she despised him in her heart. Now, there is a good chance that this event was not the turning point in their relationship. It's not like she was like, oh man, I love my husband. I can't wait for him to get home. Oh, he's dancing. I hate him now. I don't think that was the way it was. Most likely, it was a process to get here. We can see that their marriage is not on the best terms by the way they both kind of speak to each other. Let's break down 20 and 21 a little bit. Picture yourself if you're married, like you're in this fight, and it might make some sense. So let's do this. But when David returned to his home, or to bless his household, Mikael, the daughter of Saul, came out to meet David and said, how the king of Israel distinguished himself today. I don't know about you, but that sounds like sarcasm. I don't think she's too happy about this. He uncovered himself today in the eyes of his servants, maids, as one of the foolish ones shamefully uncovers himself. So she starts out with sarcasm, and then she moves into exaggeration. I don't know if you guys have ever been in a fight with your spouses. I have. My wife can attest to that. Sarcasm doesn't work well. Exaggeration doesn't work well. I'm that exaggerator. I go to the extremes of things in arguments. But they don't work. And they don't work here either. And what do I mean by exaggeration? Well, she's saying, you are like the idiots that go around naked all the time. Like, what are you doing? But she's exaggerating that. One, this passage says he's wearing a linen ephod, which is what the priests wore. But in another account of this, in 1 Chronicles, chapter 15, verse 27, the same story. Now David was clothed with a robe of fine linen with all the Levites who were carrying the ark, and the singers and Kenanya. Is that right?
Say it like you mean it.
Kenanya. The leader of the singing with the singers. David also wore an ephod of linen. So in this passage, he's wearing two things. He's wearing a robe, which was mostly a kingly garment, and also the priestly ephod. So he wasn't just like wearing a loincloth. He was wearing two things. And I don't know about you, robes kind of cover your whole body. So she's exaggerating this. Oh, you're uncovering yourself. Well, not really. He had a kingly robe on and a priestly garment, which could be, if you want, a foreshadowing of one of David's descendants who's also a priest and a king. Who is that? Jesus. Good. So she's sarcastic. She's exaggerating her points. And David's retort, while true, is kind of a little, I'd say, unloving. Let's see what he says. So David said to Mikael, it was before the Lord who chose me above your father, above all his house, to appoint me ruler over the people of the Lord of Israel. Therefore, I will celebrate before the Lord. David's right. The Lord did choose him. He was right. He was celebrating before the Lord, but that was kind of an unloving response. Like, hey, listen here. God chose me over your dad. So, haha, like, this is, it's so close to home. I don't, like, oof. So we can see that these feelings did not just come out of the blue. Relationships, especially marriages, need to be invested in. If wrongs are done, forgiveness needs to be given. If hearts are broken, kindness needs to be shared. Let's look at Mikhail. Right now, she is filled with bitterness. She is filled with bitterness. Now, why could that be? She's a queen or a princess, whichever one you want to use. She's royalty right now. So why would she be filled with bitterness? Well, let's look at her past. Let's look at her relationship with her father. Her father kind of used her as a tool. And what do I mean by that? Well, let's look at 1 Samuel 18, 20 through 21. So David's kind of getting in the picture of Saul's life. He's hanging around more. He's becoming friends with Jonathan, Saul's son. And then this happens. Now Mikael, the Saul's daughter, loved David. When they told Saul the thing was agreeable to him, he thought, I will give her to him that she may become a snare to him, and that the hand of the Philistines may be against him. Therefore Saul said to David, for a second time, you may be my son-in-law today. That last line is because Saul was going to give David one of his other daughters, but then at the last second he gave her to someone else. So he's saying, hey, here's a second chance. You can become my son-in-law. But he did it because he wanted David to get the brunt of the Philistines. He wanted his daughter to be a snare to this guy who is most likely going to be the main adversary of Saul. That sounds like you're being used. He didn't do it because she loved David. He did it for his own gain. And soon after their marriage, David and Mikhail, she helps David escape Saul, who's wanting to kill him. And once David is gone, Saul gives her to another man. He's like, okay, you're not needed with that relationship anymore. Let's go to another one. So she may have felt like a commodity to her father. And possibly from David also. Possibly from David also. One commentator used this story as an example of that. 2 Samuel 3:13 through 16. So Saul has died at this point. One of his sons is vying for the throne over David, but Abner, the general of that army, is wanting to make a covenant with David. So this is where we jump in. And he said, good, this is David, I will make a covenant with you, but I demand one thing of you. Namely, you shall not see my face unless you first bring me Mikael, the Saul's daughter, when you come to see me. So David sent messengers to Ishbosheth, Saul's son, saying, give me my wife Mikael, to whom I was betrothed, for 100 foreskins of the Philistines. Now that is a different story. Let's move past that little section. Ishbosheth sent and took her from her husband, from Paltiel, the son of Laish. But her husband went with her, weeping as he went, and followed her as far as Bahurim. Then Abner said to him, go, return. So he returned. So not only was she married to this guy, David says, hey, I'm here for Saul's daughter. I paid some ransom for her, and I want her back. I don't know, that doesn't seem like, hey, I want her back because I love her. Hey, I want her back because of this. It's, I've paid my bride price for her. I want her back. So that could possibly be another thing. These could all possibly be reasons, but we know for a fact that she was harboring bitterness in her heart. And bitterness can cause so many problems. It just festers and eats away at a person. It's like a parasite. And if not taken care of, it could also affect others. Hebrews 12:15 says this, see to it that no one comes short of the grace of God, that the root of bitterness springing up causes trouble, and by it many be defiled. The root of bitterness springing up, causing trouble and defiling others. Her bitterness definitely spilled over, and it affected more than her emotions, more than her actions in that one moment. So number 2 with Mikhail, she was cynical and judgmental of David's motives. Her accusations were exaggerated. You were dancing around basically naked. And some of them were just not true. David wasn't naked, and he didn't dance for the servant girls that were there. He was doing it for the Lord. She thought that he was not acting like a king. Just think about her father. Her father was huge. He was a head taller than everybody else in the crowd. He was a great general. He carried himself like a king of those days, of that land. So she's looking at her husband dancing around, twirling like a child. And she thought he looked foolish. And some commentators say that he could have possibly been resembling pagan worship by dancing around like that. And her being a religious Jewish princess would say, like, no, we don't do that. We don't worship that way. But of all her thoughts, she did not understand or hear the words that Samuel had spoken about her very own husband. When Samuel needed to go pick out a new king for Israel over her father Saul, this is what God told to Samuel in 1 Samuel 16:7. But the Lord said to Samuel, do not look at this at his appearance or at the height of his stature, because I have rejected him. For God sees not as a man sees, for man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. That's God saying, I'm rejecting David's brothers, and I'm going after David because of his heart, not by the way he looks. And it didn't matter what he looked like. It didn't matter what he was doing. What mattered what was going on inside of his heart. He was worshiping his God in a different way, but he was still worshiping his God. And speaking of worshiping, this is the third thing we can see from Mikhail. She was a spectator only in worship. She was a spectator only. What is she doing when the ark comes in? She's looking out. She sees it coming in. She sees the rejoicing of the people. And all she sees is, oh, there's my husband, and he's dancing funny. She's not happy that this is happening. She's not worshiping with the people. And that is probably her first and biggest mistake. If she would have been rejoicing, been worshiping with the rest, would this have turned out the way that it did? I don't know. I do not know. It's an interesting thought, though. So what can we salvage from Mikhail's story? Again, we know this story well from David's perspective, but this is a story about Mikhail too. Number one, do not be consumed with bitterness, cynical attitudes, and judgment. Bitterness towards someone else is not only damaging to that other person, it damages you. Your heart is affected. You are the one eroding away because you're holding on to this negative bitterness. Forgive freely and you will be blessed. Jesus talks about forgiveness quite a bit. And in the story where your brother comes and says, hey, forgive me for this sin. Hey, forgive me for this sin. The same sin over and over 7 times in one day. Is that story about the guy being forgiven? No, it's about the guy who's doing the forgiving. You need to forgive. Not only to forgive them, but also to let go of that, what's holding you down. Forgive freely. And let's not judge others when we don't know their hearts. Let's not judge others when we don't know their hearts. We worship very similarly, all of us here at this church. We stand up, we sing, we're very quiet and respectful during the sermon time. But if someone was to come in and they were to dance down the aisles during the songs, would we be like, yeah, do it? Or would we kind of look at him like, what is he doing? What is that? Or during the sermon, if someone was like, amen, or preach it, yeah, that kind of stuff, would we join in? Would we ignore it? Would we look at him like, hey, that's not how we do things at this church? What would we do? We shouldn't be judging those people because we don't know what their hearts are like. Their hearts might be closer to God than ours. So that's number one. Number two, do not be a spectator in worship only. Do not be just a spectator. Be engaged in worship, in any kind of worship, whether you're singing. Maybe singing's not your thing. Maybe playing an instrument's not your thing. You can worship in many different ways, by giving, by teaching. Worship has many different forms. And I'm very thankful for Tanner and his team, that they lead us in worship, that they don't put on a concert for us. I've seen plenty of times, it's this big event, lights flying all over the place. The music is awesome, but we're not worshiping because we're just watching the show. We need to be engaged in the worship, and I'm thankful that Tanner understands that, and he understands the heart of worship. So be engaged in worship. And number 3, relationships need investments. We need to invest in our relationship with God by worshiping him. And we are called to be people of grace, forgiveness, and kindness. When people sin against us, we need to forgive them. When someone messes up, we need to give them grace. When someone is having a terrible time, we need to give them kindness. Relationships need investments. And it's not just people you know and love the best. It's not just your family or your best friends. It's everybody in the church. I'm looking at many faces that I don't quite recognize. I wouldn't say that you're my best friends. But you are the people that we need to be giving this stuff out to. I'm going to close with a personal story. I hope that's okay. Let me take you back to the year of 2004. 2004. I was in 8th grade. 8th grade. That's a long time ago. 8th grade. And I had a crush on a girl. Surprising, I know. I had a crush on a girl. And me not being one to keep that in, I flat out told her. I was like, hey, I like you. Do you like me? And she said, I only like senior guys. Because she was a freshman, and I was an 8th grader, so it wouldn't have worked out. But she only likes senior guys. And I was crushed. My little 8th grade heart was broken. And it was right before a youth group outing. So we were just about to go out on this outing, and I was so crushed I couldn't go. And I walked back home, because we lived in the Heights at the time. So I walked back home, little tears on my 8th grade face. My mom was home. Mom, do you remember this story? That's a no. Okay. She was home, and she saw that I was in tears, and she wanted to talk to me about it. And I said, Mom, I don't want to talk to you about girl problems. And she wisely decided not to talk to me, but she did say under her breath, these girls are messing with my boys too much, or something like that. I don't know. So anyway, I was discouraged, brokenhearted, crying. And then a knock came on my door, and I opened it, and it was one of my brother's best friends. Now, my brother Matthew, he is 4 years older than me, so this is a senior knocking on the door. And I was like, okay, hey, man, my brother's not here. He's on that youth group outing. Why aren't you there? And he's like, oh, I'm not here for your brother. I'm here for you. And it's like, oh, well, why? I'm an 8th grader. You're a senior. Why would you want to hang out with me? And he's like, doesn't matter. Look, he pulls out his PS2, PlayStation 2, which is the coolest thing at the time. And he just got the Lord of the Rings, the Two Towers video game, which is my favorite movies. And the game is pretty fun too. And he said, we're going to play this. And we did. We played it. This older guy who talked to me a few times, you're hurting, and I'm going to try to make that better. You're not my friend. We're not best friends. I'm your brother's best friend. But I'm going to still show you this kindness because I know you're having a hard time. And I've never forgotten that. And I don't even know if he remembers it. But that's the kind of thing that we need to be doing for each other. He didn't know me that well. He sacrificed his time. He didn't go on this youth group outing, and he hung out with me, some 8th grade kid, playing Lord of the Rings games. So that's the kind of kindness that we need to be giving each other. That's the kind of forgiveness and grace we need to be giving each other. And you can look around this room, and you can see great examples of people that do that. Give grace, give forgiveness, give kindness. But the one we should be looking to the most is Jesus. He is the perfect example of that. So, can you think of a time when someone had given one of these things to you? Or can you think of somebody in your life right now that could use a little bit of grace, a little bit of forgiveness, a little bit of kindness? I'm sure you can. Because that's what Jesus would do. So, let's pray. Lord God, I thank you for today. I thank you for this chance that we get to open your word and look at the story with a different perspective on Mikhail's life instead of David's. Lord, if there's anybody in here working through bitterness or working through grudges or hurts, Lord, help us to ask for forgiveness of that sin and just to work through that process of forgiving whoever has caused those things. Lord, you have called us to be people who give grace, who give kindness, who offer forgiveness. Lord, give us the strength to do that when it's hard, because it is hard sometimes. Lord, help us to be bold and to seek out those people that are hurting, that need these things. Lord, we ask you for a lot of strength in this. And it's in your Son's name I pray. Amen.